Imagine this. The sun dips below the horizon, and the world is plunged into a deep, bone-chilling cold. There's no thermostat to nudge up, no friendly hum of a furnace kicking in. For our ancestors, this was the start of a nightly fight for survival, a battle fought not with armies, but with mud, straw, and pure grit. How did ordinary people, without any of our modern gadgets, possibly endure the brutal, relentless siege of winter? The answers are found in their forgotten ingenuity, their tight-knit communities, and their deep understanding of a world that was both their provider and their greatest enemy. What we see as a simple inconvenience was, for them, a matter of life and death, and their methods will surprise you with their mix of brilliance and brutality. Before we can appreciate their clever solutions, we have to face the terrifying reality of the problem. Winter wasn't just a chilly season, it was a predator. It was a tangible force that reshaped every part of life, turning the world into a hostile landscape where one wrong move could be your last. The most obvious danger was the cold itself. Without insulated homes and modern medicine, hypothermia was a constant, looming threat, and it could strike quietly, not just in a blizzard, but inside your own home. But the cold was only half the battle. Hunger was its twin. The end of the harvest kicked off a long, slow countdown. Every single calorie was precious, a unit of energy to be carefully rationed until spring. Preserved foods were a lifeline, but as weeks stretched into months, supplies dwindled. Malnutrition was a constant companion, weakening the body's defenses against cold and disease. There are even reports from the Skav region of Russia of peasants entering a state of near hibernation, getting up just once a day to eat a piece of hard bread and stoke the fire, a desperate move to save every last bit of energy. Then came the isolation. When heavy snows fell, travel became nearly impossible. Villages and homesteads were cut off from the world for weeks, even months. A simple injury, a sudden illness, or a failing food supply could become a crisis with no hope of outside help. This wasn't just a physical challenge. It was psychological. The world shrank to the four walls of your home, and the silence of the snow-covered landscape could be deafening. Daily life wasn't lived, it was endured. Everything was dictated by one priority: conservation. Conserve heat, conserve food, conserve energy. Every action was weighed against its cost. Life contracted into a slow, patient wait for the sun's return. The world outside the small circle of firelight was a dangerous place, and the main goal for every man, woman, and child was simply to see the dawn. This was the brutal reality they faced, and their ingenuity was a weapon forged in that relentless cold. How do you defend against an enemy as relentless as the cold? For our ancestors, the first line of defense was the home. But these weren't the spacious, cozy houses we imagine. A pre-industrial home was a fortress, a sanctuary engineered for one main purpose: to trap every precious degree of warmth. In many parts of Europe, the very construction of a peasant home was a masterclass in insulation. Using a technique called wattle and daub, a woven lattice of wood, the water was packed with a sticky mix of wet soil, clay, animal dung, and straw. When this daub dried, it created thick, surprisingly effective walls. They acted like a thermal battery, soaking up heat from the fire during the day and slowly releasing it through the night. And these were just European methods. In Korea, for example, people developed brilliant underfloor heating systems known as on-hill roofs, were often thatched with thick layers of straw or reeds. A well-maintained thatched roof could be several feet thick and was actually highly water-resistant, creating a massive insulating blanket that trapped rising heat. The floors, often just packed earth, were covered with a deep layer of straw, which both insulated the home from the frozen ground and gave people a warmer surface to walk and sleep on. But the greatest enemy of warmth is a drought. Our ancestors were meticulous in their war against them. They'd stuff every crack and gap with moss, mud, or rags, in a process called chinking. Animal hides, or heavy cloths were hung over doorways and windows. Wealthier households might hang large, thick tapestries on their cold stone walls. We see them as decoration today, but their main job was insulation, making a real difference by cutting down on drafts and taking the chill off the stone. Even the design of the home was strategic. Many buildings were low and compact to minimize the surface area exposed to the wind. Building into a hillside or near a stand of trees could provide a natural windbreak. Still, these homes were far from perfect. The features that kept heat in also trapped smoke. It wasn't until the later Middle Ages that the chimney started to appear. and even then, its adoption was slow and varied by region and wealth. For many, the open hearth remained the norm for centuries. These homes weren't about comfort, they were about survival. They were a testament to the idea that with enough ingenuity, even basic materials could build a fortress against the frost. If the house was the fortress, the fire was its beating heart. It was the radiant, life-giving center of the pre-industrial winter. Fire was heat, light, a way to cook, and the focal point of family life. And managing that fire, it was a full-time job. The main fuel was of course wood. Communities worked all summer to gather and stockpile it. In places without forests, people got creative. Peat, cut from bogs and dried, burned slowly and steadily, perfect for heating a small space. In the most desperate times, even dried animal dung was used as fuel. Early homes often had a simple open hearth in the middle of the room. It radiated heat in all directions, but it also filled the space with blinding, choking smoke that hopefully found its way out a hole in the roof. You'd find yourself constantly rotating like you were on a spit, toasting one side while the other froze. The invention of the chimney was a game changer. Castles had enormous fireplaces, but they were famously inefficient, with most of the heat going straight up the flue. Surviving the night was the real challenge. Letting the fire go out was not an option. Families would bank the embers, covering them with ash to smolder slowly, preserving a core of heat that could be coaxed back to life in the morning. But the open flame wasn't their only tool. Our ancestors were masters of thermal mass. They'd heat stones or bricks in the hearth during the day, and at night, wrap them in cloth and place them in beds. These primitive, portable radiators could make a cold bed bearable for hours. For those who could afford them, portable metal or pottery containers, called braziers, were filled with hot charcoal. A family could huddle around one, but it came with the deadly risk of carbon monoxide poisoning in a poorly ventilated room. Fire was a demanding and dangerous master. The risk of an errant spark setting the thatched roof or straw floor ablaze was constant. Yet, despite the danger, fire was the difference between a home and a tomb. It was the glowing, crackling symbol of defiance against the cold. A warm home and a roaring fire were great, but the moment you stepped outside, you were on your own. The final layer of defense was the one you wore. Pre-industrial clothing wasn't about fashion, it was a personal insulation system. The principle they used is the same one that guides modern outdoor experts: layering. The secret to staying warm isn't just the clothes, but the air they trap. Our ancestors understood this. The layer closest to the skin was usually linen, which helped wick away moisture. But the real workhorse was wool. Worn over the linen, wool was the primary insulator. Its fibers create countless tiny air pockets that trap body heat. And wool has an almost magical property. It keeps much of its insulating power even when it gets wetter. Total lifesaver in damp, snowy climate. People wore layers of it. Woolen tunics, trousers, and even wraps for their legs. The outermost layer was a shield, a heavy woolen cloak, often with a hood, acted like a windbreaker, an overcoat in one. Leather or fur from common animals like rabbits could be used for even better protection. No part of the body was forgotten. Hands were covered with mittens, which keep fingers together to share heat. Feet were protected by sturdy leather boots, sometimes stuffed with extra straw for insulation. And then there was headwear. You've probably heard that you lose 40% of your body heat through your head. Well, it turns out that's a myth. Heat loss is really about exposed surface area, and your head only accounts for about 7 to 10% of it. Still, our ancestors knew covering your head was just common sense. Almost everyone, rich or poor, wore a nightcap to bed to conserve every bit of precious body heat. People often slept in most of their clothes, creating a personal, portable environment that allowed them to function in a world that was constantly trying to freeze them. While individual ingenuity was key, the ultimate weapon against winter wasn't a thing but a strategy: community. Our modern idea of personal space was a dangerous luxury. Survival depended on huddling together. This started with the family. For ordinary people, the bed was a communal space. Entire families, parents, kids, maybe even a grandparent would pile into a single large bed, often just a box filled with a straw mattress. It is simple physics. Sleeping next to someone reduces how much energy your own body has to burn to stay warm. In a world of scarce calories, this was a critical energy-saving tactic. Even the grand four-poster bed started as a practical tool. The heavy curtains weren't for decoration. They were drawn at night to create a room within a room, trapping body heat and blocking drafts. But the huddling didn't stop there. In many peasant homes, the line between the living space and the barn was blurry. During the coldest months, valuable livestock like cows or sheep would be brought inside at night. This protected the family's most valuable assets from freezing, and a single cow generates a surprising amount of body heat. Having several animals in a small space could raise the temperature by several crucial degrees. It was smelly and unsanitary, but the extra warmth could mean the difference between life and death. This led to a behavior that some historians call social hibernation. As food ran low, people would drastically reduce their activity. An observer in 19th century France noted that men in one village would spend their days in bed, packing their bodies tightly together in order to stay warm and to eat less food. It was a conscious strategy to wait out the worst of the winter. This communal approach underscores a fundamental truth about pre-industrial life. Survival was a team sport. In the fight against winter, the body was a furnace that had to be stoked. Without the internal heat from food, a person would quickly freeze. The entire year was geared towards one goal: stockpiling enough food to get through the long, barren months. The process began with a frantic autumn harvest. Meats were salted, smoked, or dried. Vegetables like turnips and carrots were stored in root cellars. Grains, the backbone of the diet, were protected in granaries. With the pantry full, the challenge became rationing. The winter diet was monotonous, built around a dish called pottage, a thick, perpetual stew that simmered over the fire for days. Into the pot went grains, dried beans, root vegetables, and any scraps of meat or bone they had. It was the fuel that kept the internal furnace burning. Hunger was a constant, gnawing presence. As winter dragged on, stockpiles shrank. People adapted by minimizing movement and sleeping for long hours. Every single action was an energy calculation. Is this chore worth the calories I'll burn doing it? The lack of fresh food meant vitamin deficiencies like scurvy were a real danger, though adding things like preserved cabbage to pottage helped. Food was life. It was warmth from the inside out, and managing it was just as important as managing the fire. In the face of winter, the most important survival tool wasn't an object, but a social contract: the community. The idea of the rugged individualist surviving alone is a modern fiction. For our ancestors, cooperation wasn't a choice. It was the fabric of existence. An individual was vulnerable, but the community was resilient. When snow made the roads impassable, the village became an island. No single family had everything they needed. Neighbors relied on each other for everything. If one family's firewood ran low, they could borrow from another, knowing the favor would be returned. If a hunter was successful, the meat was often shared. Labor was also a shared resource. Men might work together to clear a path or fix a storm-damaged roof. Women would gather indoors to spin or mend clothes, sharing warmth, light, and companionship. This social safety net was most critical for the vulnerable. The community was the only welfare system. People checked on the elderly and the sick, and neighbors would step in to care for children if a parent was ill. This wasn't just charity, it was social insurance. Everyone knew they could be the one in need next. This deep-seated culture of mutual aid was the invisible shield that protected them. Winter was also a time for storytelling, games, and crafts around the hearth, which broke the monotony and reinforced the bonds that held everyone together. In the end, this is a story of how people, faced with a common enemy, chose to band together. The resilience of our ancestors is a powerful reminder of how much we've overcome. If this journey into the past fascinated you, and maybe gave you a new appreciation for your thermostat, from the mud and dung in their walls to the shared warmth of a crowded bed, the story of winter survival is a testament to human ingenuity. Our ancestors fought a relentless war against an enemy that could only be endured. They did it without modern science, relying instead on an instinctual understanding of their world and an unbreakable bond with their community. Every layer of wool, every jar of preserved food, and every banked ember was a small act of defiance. Life was stripped down to its essentials: warmth, food, and shelter. The pursuit of these basics was a full-time job. For many of us today, winter has been buffered. We've tamed it with central heating and lit its long nights with electricity. What was once a season of mortal danger is now one of cozy comforts. But it's a luxury that glosses over the fact that for many people around the world, staying warm is still a desperate struggle. In gaining our convenience, perhaps we've lost a connection to the natural world. and the essential understanding that sometimes the surest path to survival is to huddle together against the storm. The methods of our ancestors are a powerful reminder that for most of human history, warmth wasn't a utility bill, but a hard-won victory.